Welcome to today's presentation where we have the pleasure to present Sampo. The subject of today's presentation is get a little bit better understanding of the exchange offer you made to Sampo to the Top Denmark shareholders. To help us through today's presentation, we are joined by you, Sami, Head of Investor Relations at Sampo. So of course that's the angle today. We're seeing it from Sampo's viewpoint today. Short introduction to the offer, but mainly Q&A. So of course you're very welcome to ask questions in the box down below. You're very welcome to do it also in Danish. I will try and translate to the best of my abilities. I would also like to highlight people's attention to that this is of course a very big deal and with a lot of information, and at sampo.com/Top Denmark, there's a lot of information, also some Q&As and all the documents concerning here. So we hope this is enough to help people through, but if you need more information, of course, feel very free to get more information at that page. But for now, I think I will hand the call over to you, Sami, for a short introduction, and then we take the questions.
Thank you, Michael, and thanks everyone for joining us today. Like Michael said, I'm the head of IR at Sampo. My name is Sami. I've been at Sampo since 2020. So let me start by introducing Sampo as a company briefly. We are the market leader in the Nordic P&C insurance. We have about 20% market share in the region as a whole. We're present in all the countries, all the customer groups, and all the products. Due to our scale and the investments that we've made into particularly digitalizations, we're able to provide insurance products with excellent service at a fair price. And you can see this in the very high and consistently high retention rates that we have in our Nordic business. On top of the Nordic market position, we have a UK business, a digital UK business that offers attractive growth. We are actually one of a very small number of sort of modern, digitally capable businesses in the UK market that are disrupting the older legacy players over there. Across the group, we focus mainly on retail and SME insurance. So out of the roughly 8.5 billion of premium that we wrote last year, around three quarters out of that is retail and SME. So in summary, we are actually a pretty unique company by being the largest operator in the stable Nordic region, and by being effectively a disruptor in the UK market and being able to grow there. So what does this mean for us as an investment? What kind of investment are we really? Well, put very simply, we're actually quite similar to Top Denmark, who we're looking to do this deal with. We're a high quality company, we're a defensive company, and we offer attractive capital returns. The main difference is that we have a little bit more growth, or have had a little bit more growth in our earnings than what Top has. So let me examine this a little bit more further. We have very high and stable margins because we operate in a market with high barriers of entry, and we've worked very hard to make these barriers to entry even higher over time. Second, we also aim to grow in certain areas. And I mentioned the UK already, but we're also growing in other areas such as personal insurance, property, digital SME insurance, and so on. And when I'm talking about growth here, I'm talking about growth above market rate. So, and the core of our value creation is very much this growth in our operating earnings. And we've set a target to achieve at least 7% operating EPS growth in the period 2024 to 2026. In terms of capital returns, we offer both a highly reliable regular dividend as well as excess capital returns at times when we do find ourselves in an excess capital position. The regular dividend is driven by our operating earnings, and the growth in that regular dividend is driven by growth in our operating earnings, and we aim to deliver a dividend of at least 70% of our operating EPS. And on top of that, we can, from time to time, offer buybacks or extra dividends if we find that we have too much capital on our balance sheet. And finally, I also want to point out our high resilience, because we are a very defensive share. We have a very resilient business model. We have resilience against economic cycles, so we're not very much dependent on changes in economic demand in the near term. And we have a very strong balance sheet that protects us from financial volatility. So why are we interested in Top Denmark then, given all of this? Well, our presence in the Danish market is actually a little bit different to what it is in the other countries. We're there through a smaller market share via If, and then we've owned the half of Top Denmark to this date. And this has worked fine in the past, and but it has meant that we haven't been able to realize synergies between these two companies. Now that insurance is becoming more and more digitalized, we can see that there's more and more potential synergies to realize, particularly given our expertise in digital insurance. So quite simply put, we think now is the time to start working on this project. We've said as part of this deal that we see up to or around 700 million Danish kroner of annual synergies that can only be realized by completing this transaction. This is clearly very attractive, and this is also the reason for why we've decided that it's worth offering a premium of nearly 30% to Top Denmark investors on day one as part of doing this deal. However, looking beyond that, I think the journey is also very attractive. We see 6% EPS accretion as part of the deal. We see that we can increase our capital generation target by 500 million as a result of this deal. And those two things together will, of course, mean more attractive capital returns to Sampo investors also in the future. So what are the next steps? Well, first and most important, the offer period ends next Monday, assuming that we can reach the acceptance condition of 90% that we've set. After that, we would hope to list on Nasdaq Copenhagen the following week. And then after that, the real sort of hard operational work will begin, the work with making Top Denmark an integrated part of the Sampo group. And that's the end of my presentation.
Perfect. Let's jump into some questions, what it was about today. You know, as a Danish person, we are always very concerned about the tax side of it. Have you gotten the approval from the Danish tax authorities that you can exchange the shares without triggering any tax payment? And what does that actually mean? And I know you can't give individual tax advice, but in general terms, if you can talk a little bit about what you applied for, whether you've gotten it, and what that should mean.
Yeah, so I mean, you're not the only people to be concerned about tax. I will begin by saying, yes, I can confirm that we have received the approval that this would be a tax-neutral transaction for Danish private shareholders. And that quite simply put means that you wouldn't have to pay any tax on the transaction as such immediately. Obviously, later on, there might be capital gains taxes and so on. But the transaction itself wouldn't be taxable.
And if I understand that correctly, you know, you could also that is if you accept the exchange offer. Of course, not if you sell it into the market or you get a compulsory if you get more than 90% and you claim the shares. That it's only if you exchange the offer. Is that correctly understood?
That's correctly understood. It applies to if you accept the offer and the offer going through. That's right.
Okay. And the next one is, of course, also, have you got the approval to list the Sampo A shares on the Copenhagen Stock Exchange? And does that mean that we as the Top Denmark shareholders, we will actually get the shares on the Danish listing? Is that the plan?
Yes, that's right. We have the approval to list on Nasdaq Copenhagen, and very much look forward to that, completing that process. Actually, it's something that we're very excited about. It does indeed also mean that everyone who accepts the offer, every Top Denmark shareholder who accepts the offer, will receive Danish listed Sampo shares as part of the transaction, assuming, of course, that the offer is successful and that we reach the 90% if we don't reach the 90%, then no one will receive any shares.
Yeah, and let's jump right into that. There's a question from the audience, and I also have one on my paper. What happens if you don't get the 90% of the shares in Top Denmark? There's a question from the audience.
Yeah, no, and that's of course a fair question. And I guess the first thing I want to say that the value creation in this deal is completely conditional on us being able to fully integrate Top Denmark into the Sampo group. And to be able to do that, we need the 90%, because then we can take full control of all the shares.
Yeah.
Without that, we won't be able to realize the synergies that we've talked about in this deal. And that also means that we have no way of financing the premium that we're offering day one to Top Denmark shareholders. Now, the one thing that we are conscious of, though, is the fact that this is an offer where we have a significant contingent of retail shareholders, and it's also an offer that was launched at the time when some people are still on holiday.
Yeah.
So the only slight caveat to what I'm saying here now is that potentially, if we felt that it was just a case of all the replies hadn't got in by next Monday, then we could still wait. We could extend the offer for a little bit of time, but that really is the only option we have in a way. Beyond that, it will be very difficult to do much.
And one of the questions I've heard a lot, and it is a normal reaction from investors, and maybe you already answered that, but I will ask you this directly. Why shouldn't I just lean back and see what happens and don't accept anything and so on? If you understand the question,
yes.
I know it sounds a little bit hard, but it's always nice to see what other people do or let them take the decision. So I don't know whether you can give me an answer to that, or you already indirectly gave it. This offer needs to go through to get those synergies.
Yeah, I mean, it's like you say. It's always tempting to be convenient. I'm often tempted by that myself. However, it's very simple. If not enough people accept, we will not reach the 90% threshold, which means we can't make the deal work, which means that the deal simply will not happen. We're offering a almost 30% premium as part of this deal. So we are hoping that people will be willing to do that little bit of work that we're asking in order to get that premium. And of course, if the offer goes away, there is of course a risk that the Top Denmark share price then drops down to the level where it was before we published the offer in June, which is without that 30 or almost 30% premium that we've offered as part of that deal.
Yeah, because if I understand it, and you publish this also in some later report, you pay around a PE 22 for Top Denmark, and the insurance group as such in the Nordic trades around PE 15. Is that? And I know it moves with the share price target, but I think that was originally when you sent out the offer. Is that some correct around the numbers correctly?
That's like you say, it changes a little bit from day to day, but that's roughly the correct number. And of course, what's happened here is that we have a share that was already reasonably well valued. I think partly because we had our ownership there, and people knew that this transaction was a possibility one day. And then we offered an additional almost 30% premium on top of that as part of the deal. You could see that the Top Denmark share price jumped pretty much immediately to price in almost, not quite 100%, but a very high likelihood of acceptance of the deal. So you've seen that premium in the Top Denmark share price pretty much since the day we announced the offer.
And then there's a question, you talk a lot about digitalization and that being the reason for this transaction. Are you further ahead in the other Scandinavian countries in your UK, so you can easily, the question is here, implement that in the Danish business? So are you a little bit ahead and can move that pretty fast into the Danish business?
Yeah, the level of digitalization in different markets does vary quite a bit. We're seeing the UK being almost like an extreme example of it, and then maybe Finland is the second most digitalized, and then we're seeing various degrees in the other countries. Denmark probably has been a little bit more slow to digitalize than some of the other Nordic markets. But what I think is important to point out here as well is that we're not talking about forcing any form of digital service onto people that they want. When we're often talking about how things work behind the scenes, the IT systems that we use to handle policies, that we use to do pricing, that we use to work with our partners, distribution partners, for example, like car dealers. And every bit of digitalization that we do there just improves efficiency. Just means that we're losing less and less costs in the system all the time. That obviously make it easier for the policyholders, but also more cost efficient, which I think is a benefit to everyone. So we see a chance for the Danish, the service side, the sales and service side, digitalizing more and more in the Danish market as it has in the other markets. But we also see a chance to improve these sort of back office IT systems a lot, actually.
And maybe you already answered it by this one, but there's a question here. Should we expect big changes to product offers in Top Denmark after the transaction?
No, I don't think that we should expect a big change to product selection as such, actually. I mean, mostly because insurance, the product set has been quite stable over a long period of time. There are some new products that have emerged in the last sort of 20, 30 years, like personal insurance and a few other similar products. But most of those, I think, pretty much Top Denmark has already, and if have already actually as well. It's more a question of how we service those products and how efficiently we can service those products.
Perfect. Yeah, but then let's jump a little bit back, and you talked a lot about the synergies, the multiples, and so on. If I understand the deal in the big terms, you actually offer a lot of this tangible synergies, and tangible is just the word I think you can use for what you can calculate in Excel sheets, and thereby offering, and that is what you can put up in front of your board and get it approved. So most of that is actually transferred, and this is an exchange offer. So the question here, I also hear a little bit from Top Denmark investors, if we have gotten that via exchange, or maybe my question turned a little bit around, is there intangible synergies about being bigger and so on that you can't put in an Excel sheet, you can't put in front of your board and thereby offer it, but actually, you know, running an insurance company, you probably have an idea that if you join us for the journey, we can maybe get a little bit more out of also the intangible synergies.
Yes. So first of all, I want to just confirm that we are offering up a fair part of the synergies as part of this deal on day one to Top Denmark shareholders, coming back to the premium valuation that we talked about a minute ago. So absolutely. However, I think there's going to be benefits even looking beyond these immediate, very tangible, very calculable synergies that we can, you know, sort of agree on and recognize as part of this transaction. We feel confident on those, and we're very happy with those. But the transaction does mean more longer term. It means that we can start combining the insurance skills and technology that we have as the largest P&C insurance business in the Nordic region with the really significant and excellent local expertise that Top Denmark has in a lot of lines of business where we're not at scale or big in Denmark. And I think those two together will be a very powerful combination that will bring a sort of best of both worlds to customers and create also a lot of shareholder value beyond that. If you take a step back and look at our history, actually If was formed through a combination of two big P&C companies back in the late 90s. And the story of If ever since then has been to gradually make the business a little bit better all the time, mainly by extracting cross-border synergies and IT synergies across the business. And that's proven to be a very, very powerful concept over the last sort of 20 plus years. Much more powerful, I think, than anyone would have imagined at the time.
And then a question for the bookkeeping, just to be sure. Have you gotten the regulatory approvals that you need to this exchange offer? Meaning, it can't be derailed by some, some governments there or some regulatory authorities stepping in and saying no.
Yes, we've got all the necessary regulatory approvals, so there's no uncertainty left on that front.
And then there's a question, and I also heard that the timing of it. Why is the offer coming now? Is there something in the competitive picture out there that makes you react now, or is it other reason? In general, timing. I think, as you said, there was already a premium in Topdanmark. You have really slimmed down your balance sheet, selling things off. So people have expected this. So a little bit about the timing. Is there something in the competitive situation that is triggering this now?
No, I wouldn't say it's the competitive situation. That's actually been pretty stable for some time now, and pretty sort of robust. But it's three different factors, I would say. First of all, strategically, both Sampo and Topdanmark have over the last few years decided to focus purely on P&C insurance. As you said, we have slimmed down the group. We used to have a big ownership in Nordea, a Nordic bank. We used to have a life insurance business, and we've divested those and focused purely on P&C insurance. Similarly, Topdanmark used to have a fairly significant life insurance business in Denmark. That's now been divested. And what that means is that you can get a much cleaner combination of the two businesses. You can have a much simpler discussion between parties about how to value the different entities and be able to come to an agreement about how to do a transaction like this. So that was number one. Number two comes back to my point about digitalization. We have not particularly overlapping exposures between If and Topdanmark in Denmark. So there's not been a lot of sort of traditional synergies in the past, and there isn't still. But over time, these digital synergies have increased, and that's made the transaction economically possible. And then the other thing that's of course important, the third point, is staying on the economics, is that as we've become more similar businesses, our valuations have also become more similar to what they were before, and that's enabled that we can make financial sense of a transaction like this.
And then there's a question from the audience, and I know, and I should again remind you don't want to do individual tax advising, but there's a question here. Is it like in Nordea, you are the home office in Finland, like Nordea, and there's something about that you pay out dividends, and then you actually have to apply to get the dividends, extra tax back paid in Finland. Will that also be the case if you own Sampo shares?
So this depends a lot on the person actually, and your individual circumstances, and also which bank you use. We've had a lot of discussions about this because this is obviously a situation we want to avoid, and something that this is actually not how the system is meant to work either. You're not meant to get this administrative hassle. It's meant to happen automatically. And I would say that in a lot of cases it does. So this is far from being a problem for a lot of shareholders. For example, I've spoken with Nordnet, and they don't believe that this would be an issue for their holders at all, actually. And I think there are other banks as well out there who this wouldn't be a problem with. So it can depend on the bank, it can depend on your individual circumstances, but I certainly hope that this shouldn't be an issue broadly.
And I can agree. I have Finnish shares in Nordnet, and they actually tell you're a Danish person, so they know it, and you can also apply for it if the banks are willing to do that. Your bank, it actually counts for 5 years. So, but of course, yes. it's very individual, and then it depends on the system. So I perfectly understand you're not answering straight.
Yeah, I can't promise. I can't make any promises for everyone.
Yeah. And then a little bit about your dividends. Normally when we see companies acquiring other companies, the dividends goes down. But I think you have been pretty straightforward in answering that you expect no changes to your dividend policies as such in this transaction. Can you talk a little bit about why that is, and what dividends you could look forward to in the future? I think you already highlighted a little bit of that on a slide, but I know it's of course very important for investors in insurance.
Of course. So the transaction is purely share based, so it doesn't consume any significant amount of financial resources from us as such. It doesn't dilute our financial strength or anything like that. What does happen though is that we're getting the EPS accretion, the 6% that we've talked about, and we're expecting to get the minority earnings from Topdanmark. So the part of Topdanmark that we don't already own, that we currently don't receive the earnings on, that will become fully ours. So even before accounting for any synergies, we're expecting to add about 100 million euros per year to our earnings power. So what does that mean? Well, I said that the regular dividend is based on the operating earnings. It's paid out as a part of the operating EPS. So higher operating earnings also means a higher dividend over time. So that's positive. Similarly, additional earnings every year that come into our coffers adds to our capacity to return excess capital. So those 100 million euros before synergies provide a new opportunity for us to deploy capital. We have, as part of this transaction, said that we're going to increase our deployable capital target for 24 to 26 from currently being at least 4 billion to being at least 4.5 billion if the transaction completes. So that I guess those two give some indication of how we think around the potential to return more capital in the future.
Perfect. And then what I also hear a lot of, and you actually maybe already talked a little bit about it. What can you expect as an investor in Sampo? Is it a similar profile to that what I exchanged it with, aka Topdanmark? So I think you already alluded a little bit to it on one of your first slides, but just to, if you can repeat that or maybe talk a little bit about the profile between the two companies.
Yeah, it is quite similar. It is quite similar in that, like I said, we have a high quality earnings, defensive profile, attractive capital returns. So if your portfolio has had a place for Topdanmark, you should at least think about potentially Sampo having a place in your portfolio as well. The main difference is that we have had a little bit more earnings growth than Topdanmark, and so we, as I mentioned, we aim for EPS growth of at least 7% per year in the 2024 to 2026 period. We're obviously hoping to overachieve that, but I think that's a very solid level of growth for a highly resilient and defensive business like our one is.
And maybe we as investors now with Tryg, but we have been used to Danish only. So maybe if you can give us a little bit of experience being in more countries, I think one of the arguments I've also heard from maybe I think it was your CEO is that if you are in more countries, you are more stable, simply because sometimes we have big events in Denmark, sometimes we have worse adverse weather events in Sweden, sometimes it's in Norway. If you look out over the history in your company, do you think you have seen that working? If you understand what I mean, that it is actually maybe a little bit more of a defensive profile to be as an insurance company in broader markets.
Yeah, Absolutely. You can see that if you look at historical data for insurance companies, that the more diversified you are as a company, the more stability you can provide in terms of your earnings stream, because things like what you mentioned, weather or other large claims, do sort of average out over the different countries. Having said that, and we do definitely benefit from that. Having said that, we also place a great deal of emphasis in very good underwriting. So we don't just trust that the diversification will sort out the problems for us, but we're very, I would say, razor focused on making sure that the quality of the underwriting is so good that it looks good, even on a country by country level. And we're very happy to see that we've actually been able to see that also in the past.
Last question, and then I will let you off the hook, Sami. A little bit about communication going forward. There is, a field that you know your Danish shares, you see him in the news and so on. So it is a little bit easier to follow. That is probably why we see some home buyers in every share market. You feel more comfortable here. So can you talk a little bit about the strategy to serve maybe both the institutional and the private investors, because I guess your listing in Denmark will be one of the bigger ones if everybody when a lot of people have chosen to if they choose to exchange. So talk a little bit about how you are thinking about serving that.
Well, the listing and maintaining that sort of good and strong communication towards the Danish market is certainly something that's very important to us, and something that we feel is essential for making this listing work, and something that we very much look forward to. We see the listing as making it easier for Danish investors to own our stock in Denmark, and making it more convenient to them. Fortunately for us, it's Nasdaq in Sweden, in Finland, in Denmark. So from our perspective, it's not so much extra work or extra hassle, but rather an opportunity to become local also in another market. And we will follow that up with regular interaction. Copenhagen will certainly be a regular stop on our road shows, both in terms of meeting institutional investors, but also hopefully doing things like this and engaging with retail investors also in the future. So it's very much something we look forward to. We already have quite a few Danish shareholders actually in Sampo, and it's been a pleasure to work with them. We hope that we get more now as a result of the listing in Denmark.
Perfect. That was the last question I had on my paper, and I don't think we have more from the audience. So thank you, Sami, for taking us to a short presentation, but maybe more to answer a lot of the questions. I know I've heard a lot of them from different investors. So thank you for that, Sami.
Thank you.